Welcome, viewers. In our discussion today, you'll notice a key message repeated. God will provide for our needs. Don't think of it as redundant, but rather as seeds being planted, naturally reinforcing a deep trust in God's provision. Today, we step into a realm rich in symbolism and purpose, a carpenter's workshop. Reminiscent of Jesus' own trade, as we immerse ourselves in this setting, we reflect on his profound words in Matthew 6:33. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. In a carpenter's world, every action, from selecting the wood to the final polish, is part of a greater plan. The craftsman doesn't just focus on one aspect of the piece, but understands that each step is integral to completing the masterpiece. This holistic approach mirrors Jesus' teaching. When we prioritize seeking God's kingdom and living righteously, the other pieces of our life align and come together harmoniously. Think of a carpenter crafting a chair. He doesn't just build a sturdy frame. He also ensures comfort and aesthetics. He knows that the final product isn't just the sum of its parts, but a cohesive, functional, beautiful creation. Similarly, when we seek God's kingdom first, it's not just about spiritual fulfillment. It encompasses the fulfillment of our other needs as well. Like the carpenter who adds the finishing touches to his work, God adds to our lives in ways that complete and enrich us. Moreover, a carpenter's work is a testament to patience and trust in the process. He knows that rushing might compromise the quality. In our spiritual journey, as we focus on God's righteousness, we learn to trust in his timing and process. The assurance all these things will be given to you is a promise of God's faithfulness to provide and fulfill our needs as we dedicate ourselves to his purpose. As we leave this symbolic workshop, let us carry the essence of Jesus the carpenter with us. His teachings, much like his skilled hands once shaping wood, guide us to build a life of purpose and faith. Seeking God's kingdom and righteousness is not just a single step, but a comprehensive approach to life. And in this approach, just like in a carpenter's diligent work, we find that all our needs are met, our lives are enriched, and our spirits are fulfilled.
Having seen how a carpenter's careful work mirrors our spiritual journey, let's delve deeper into the profound message Jesus shares with us in Matthew 6:33. In this verse, Jesus isn't just giving an order here. He's presenting a challenging but rewarding way to live. His words, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well," are a call to prioritize what truly matters in life. Envision God's kingdom not as a geographical location, but as a sphere where the ideals of equity, tranquility, and sincere compassion reign supreme. To seek his kingdom means actively adopting a lifestyle that aligns with the teachings of Jesus. It necessitates daily decisions that manifest honesty, kindness, and humility, reflecting the profound values inherent in God's realm, instead of yielding to fleeting impulses or the ever-changing standards of society. When we talk about seeking his righteousness, it's more than just ticking off a checklist of do's and don'ts. It's about a sincere commitment to lead a life that aligns with God's expectations. This involves a significant shift in how we think and act, leading us to behave in ways that show God's goodness and generosity to those around us. Jesus assures us that all these things will be given to you as well. This is a clear acknowledgement of our practical needs. He's saying that when we focus on living in line with God's intentions, our needs will be taken care of. This isn't a promise of an easy life, but it is a promise of a life where our primary concern is not chasing after material success, but striving for spiritual growth and alignment with God's purposes.
This message ties in with other parts of the Bible where trust in God's provision is emphasized. Like Paul's words in Philippians 4:19, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus." In your own life, this means that as you work to live in a way that honors God, you can trust him to take care of your needs. Matthew 6:33 challenges us to rethink what we value most. It urges you to put your spiritual journey and your relationship with God at the forefront of your life. This isn't just about adhering to religious norms. It's about entrusting your life to God's capable hands, confident in his promise to provide. approach this path with determination and courage, knowing that seeking His kingdom and righteousness is key to a life that's truly meaningful and purpose-driven. In setting the stage for this insightful teaching, Jesus addresses an audience deeply concerned with life's fundamental necessities: food, clothing, and shelter. He acknowledges the validity of these concerns, understanding the human condition and its inherent needs. Yet, in His wisdom, Jesus guides the crowd to look beyond the immediacy of material worries and to consider a broader, more eternal perspective. This moment is crucial in understanding the heart of Jesus' message. He isn't disregarding the importance of needs. Rather, He is elevating the conversation to a higher plane. By placing emphasis on seeking first the kingdom and His righteousness, Jesus is redirecting our focus from the transient to the eternal, from the material to the spiritual. This shift in focus is not an instruction to neglect practical responsibilities, but an invitation to trust in a deeper provision that comes from aligning with God's will and purposes. In this context, the kingdom of God represents a dimension of living where spiritual realities govern our thoughts and actions. Jesus is calling us to a life that measures success not by material accumulation, but by spiritual enrichment. It's a life where values like compassion, justice, and mercy take precedence over fleeting worldly achievements.
Furthermore, Jesus' message here is a comforting reminder that God is acutely aware of our earthly needs. Yet, He assures us that when we prioritize our spiritual well-being and align our lives with His divine purpose, our physical needs will not be overlooked. It's a profound reassurance that in the economy of God's kingdom, attending to our spiritual health results in the holistic care of our entire being. In essence, this passage from Matthew 6:33 serves as a beacon, guiding us to realign our priorities and to find peace in the promise of God's faithful provision. It calls us to live with an awareness of God's overarching plan, trusting that our temporal needs are seen and valued by a God who cares deeply for each of us. When Jesus instructs to seek first His kingdom, He is inviting us into a transformative experience where God's reign becomes the central focus of our lives. This kingdom is not a place you can find on a map. It's a spiritual domain that exists wherever God's principles are put into action. In this kingdom, the values of love, justice, peace, and mercy are not just ideals but active choices we make every day. Living under God's reign means that our actions and decisions are guided by these eternal values. It's about creating a life where our choices reflect God's principles. This involves turning usual ways of the world upside down, where being last is valued over being first, where humility is strength, and where purity of heart opens our eyes to see God in our midst.
To seek God's kingdom is to commit to a way of life where every interaction and decision is an opportunity to bring God's love and grace into the world. It's about living in a way that constantly seeks to align with what God values most. In doing so, we not only transform our own lives, but also become agents of change in the world around us, embodying the very essence of God's kingdom on earth. When we delve into the concept of God's righteousness, as mentioned by Jesus, we're looking at something deeper than just adhering to a moral code. Righteousness in the biblical sense involves aligning our entire being, our will, actions, and desires, with God's standards. This alignment is not just about avoiding wrongdoing, but actively pursuing what is right in God's eyes. This righteousness is relational. It's about forming a connection with God where His desires become our desires, His will becomes our guide. It's a dynamic process where we continually learn and grow, constantly adjusting our lives to mirror God's character and intentions. Moreover, trusting in God's provision and goodness is an integral part of this righteousness. Even when life throws us into situations where hope seems distant, where circumstances appear bleak, living righteously means holding on to the belief that God's goodness is unwavering. It's about maintaining faith that God's plan for us is guided by His profound love and wisdom, even if it doesn't align with our immediate expectations or understanding.
In essence, seeking God's righteousness is a journey of transformation, where we learn to see the world through God's perspective and respond to life's challenges with faith and obedience. In this promise, all these things will be given to you as well. Jesus acknowledges the genuine needs we have in our physical lives. He understands our necessities for food, shelter, and clothing. Yet, he encourages us to view these needs through the lens of faith and trust in God's provision. This assurance from Jesus is a powerful reminder that while attending to our spiritual alignment with God's kingdom and righteousness, we are not neglecting our physical needs. Instead, we are placing them in the hands of a God who is deeply aware of and cares for our every need. This promise signifies a shift in how we perceive and prioritize our needs. In a world that often urges us to relentlessly pursue material wealth and security, Jesus invites us to trust that these fundamental needs will be met when we commit to living in accordance with God's ways. It's about finding a balance where our physical necessities are met not through worry and relentless striving, but through a peaceful trust in God's reliable care and provision. Embracing this promise leads us into a deeper relationship of trust with God. It's an invitation to live with the assurance that our well-being is in the hands of a benevolent God, who knows our needs even before we ask. This relationship of trust transforms our perspective, allowing us to focus on growing in God's kingdom and righteousness without being overwhelmed or defined by the pursuit of material needs. This crucial insight from the verse serves as a reminder that our pursuit of God's kingdom and righteousness is not a means to an end. It's not a transactional arrangement where we seek God merely as a way to fulfill our desires or to gain material benefits. Instead, it's about a fundamental realignment of our life's priorities.
When we seek God and His righteousness, we're embracing a lifestyle where our primary aim is to live in accordance with His will and to grow in our relationship with Him. This shift in focus is about placing God at the center of our lives, above our personal wants and aspirations. It's a journey of transforming our values and desires to align with what God values. In this process, everything else in our lives begins to find its rightful place. Our needs, desires, and ambitions are viewed through the lens of our faith and commitment to God. This doesn't mean that our needs and desires are unimportant, but rather that they are reoriented within the context of a life lived for God. This realignment brings about a profound sense of peace and purpose, as we learn to trust in God's provision and timing. It allows us to live with a sense of security and contentment, knowing that our lives are aligned with a higher purpose and guided by a loving God. In this message, Jesus is clearly contrasting the prevailing values of the world with the values of God's kingdom. Our society frequently measures success in terms of material wealth, career achievements, and personal accolades. However, this verse challenges us to adopt a radically different approach to life, one that doesn't hinge on these worldly benchmarks.
Trusting in God's provision means recognizing that our ultimate security and worth are not tied to our material possessions or social status. It's about understanding that our true security lies in God, the creator of all things. This trust is not passive, it's an active, daily choice to depend on God for our needs and to find contentment in His provision, regardless of our circumstances. Living out God's values implies that our actions, decisions, and interactions are guided by the principles of His kingdom: love, justice, mercy, and humility. It means that our lives become a reflection of these values, standing in stark contrast to a world often driven by selfish ambition and a pursuit of personal gain. This verse encourages us to build our lives on the solid foundation of God's truth and promises, finding peace and fulfillment in the eternal rather than the fleeting satisfactions of the material world. In doing so, we not only experience a deeper sense of purpose and peace in our own lives, but also become beacons of hope and light in a world that is desperately seeking something more meaningful than material success.
As we step out into our week, let's carry this message in our hearts. Let's seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, trusting that all our needs, both physical and spiritual, will be met in His perfect time and way. May this assurance give us peace and strength as we live out our faith in a world in desperate need of God's love and truth.